King Charles has honoured his brother Prince Edward in a most royal manner on his birthday. Fittingly, the King's younger brother was in Scotland on the day a new title was bestowed upon him, one that comes with the responsibility of continuing their late father Prince Philip's work with young people around the globe.
Fans who long believed King Charles held the family's most guarded inheritance were stunned as royal insiders confirmed a twist no one saw coming. For years, Charles was said to control a legacy too sensitive to share, too powerful to divide. But now, Edward's lawyers have stepped forward with documents that tell a different story. Private claims, quiet arrangements, a fortune long whispered about behind palace doors. So, was the truth hidden in plain sight? Or has the monarchy just been shaken by a revelation decades in the making? Royal agreement of over 2 decades. It was June 1999, and the air around Prince Edward was filled with excitement and expectation. In just a short time, he was going to marry Sophie Rhys-Jones, the woman he loved. The wedding preparations were moving quickly, the public was watching closely, and the royal family was busy making arrangements. Everything seemed joyful and calm. But then something happened that would quietly shape Edward's future in a way no one fully understood at that moment. As Edward and Sophie were preparing for their life together, Prince Philip walked into the room. Philip was not known for wasting time with long conversations or polite small talk. He was direct, firm, and clear in what he wanted to say.
With the pack-away refrigerator, for instance, it's all very well now. You look back and say, well,
Sophie later spoke about this meeting in an interview with the Daily Telegraph. She explained that Philip came straight in and got to the point immediately. There were no long greetings or gentle introductions. He simply said that he would very much like them to think seriously about something important. What he wanted was unexpected. He asked Edward and Sophie to consider the idea that Edward would one day become the next Duke of Edinburgh. The suggestion surprised them both. They had not been thinking about that title in that way. Edward himself had always believed that his older brother, Prince Andrew, would receive the title of Edinburgh. That seemed like the natural order of things. But Philip had a different vision for his youngest son. Philip cared deeply about the title Duke of Edinburgh. It was not just a name to him. It represented years of work, dedication, and service. He had carried that title for decades and had built a strong connection between it and his life's achievements, especially through the Duke of Edinburgh's award program. He wanted that legacy to continue in safe hands. In his mind, Edward was the right person to carry it forward. On the wedding day in June 1999, when Edward and Sophie finally married at Windsor, Buckingham Palace made an official announcement. The palace declared that Prince Edward would one day receive the Dukedom of Edinburgh. However, this would only happen after Prince Philip's title returned to the crown. In simple terms, it meant that when Philip died and the title was no longer in use, it would eventually be given to Edward. This announcement was not casual or informal. It involved 3 senior members of the royal family. It was supported by a written agreement and confirmed through a public statement. To many people watching from outside, it sounded like a clear promise from the monarchy. It seemed settled. It felt official. Few imagined that fulfilling this promise would become a complicated journey stretching over more than 2 decades. As part of the wedding arrangements, Edward accepted a different and smaller title instead. He became the Earl of Wessex. Interestingly, this title was inspired by the popular film Shakespeare in Love, which had been released in 1998. The name Wessex had a romantic and historical feeling to it, and Edward accepted it with patience and understanding. He knew that the more important title was meant to come later. He waited as the years passed. He carried out royal duties quietly and steadily. He supported his father's projects and took on more responsibilities within the family. In August 2017, Prince Philip officially stepped back from public duties at the age of 96, marking the end of a long and active royal career. Edward continued his work.
As I said, I don't think we'll see him completely disappearing, but I think he's just making it absolutely clear to organisations, look, please don't.
Often helping with programs connected to his father's legacy. Then came April 2021. Prince Philip died in April 2021 at the age of 99. His death marked the end of an era. It was a deeply emotional time for the royal family, and for many people across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Naturally, attention turned to the question of titles. Under British peerage law, when Prince Philip died, the title Duke of Edinburgh did not automatically pass to Edward. Instead, it passed to the eldest son of the monarch. At that time, that person was Charles III, who was then the Prince of Wales. So legally, the title went to Charles. The earlier understanding had been that Charles would later recreate the title and grant it to Edward. Recreating a title means that the monarch formally issues it again to another person. This step was necessary because once Charles became king, certain titles would merge with the crown unless they were given out again. In September 2022, after the death of Elizabeth II, Charles became King Charles III. With this change, many royal titles were rearranged. At that moment, the future of the Duke of Edinburgh title became even more uncertain. Between April 2021 and September 2022, the royal family faced great change and public pressure. Philip's death, followed by the Queen's passing, created a period of mourning and adjustment. But was this another sign that Edward would be overlooked? Was Charles trying to reshape royal traditions in a bold new way? Or was an internal conflict? Let's take a closer look. The hidden royal rivalry. Between April 2021 and March 2023, a quiet but serious family conflict unfolded behind the grand walls of the British royal household. On the surface, everything appeared calm and dignified. There were public ceremonies, official speeches, and carefully arranged photographs. But beneath all of that, a long-standing tension between brothers was slowly rising again. At the center of it all was King Charles III and his youngest brother, Prince Edward. According to royal biographers, Charles often felt that he did not receive the warmth and affection he longed for from his father, Prince Philip. Charles reportedly believed that his father was strict and distant with him. He felt judged and misunderstood. At the same time, Philip seemed much gentler and more playful with Edward, who was the youngest child. Philip would read to Edward, spend time playing with him, and show him a softer side that Charles felt he had rarely seen growing up. These childhood memories may have stayed with Charles for decades.
Demonstrates clearly that whilst we may not all have a shared history,
even though he grew into adulthood, became the Prince of Wales, and prepared his whole life to become king, those early feelings may never have completely disappeared. Another writer, Tom Bower, who wrote a biography about Charles, found it surprising that a man in his 70s could still feel jealous of his younger brother. After all, Edward did not compete with Charles for the throne. He did not hold a powerful public position. He generally stayed out of controversy and lived a relatively quiet royal life. Yet emotions are not always logical. Old wounds can remain sensitive even after many years. The situation became more serious in July 2021. Just a few months after Prince Philip passed away in April of that year, news began to spread that Charles had decided not to give Edward the title of Duke of Edinburgh. This title had belonged to Philip for most of his life. Many people had long believed that Philip wanted Edward to inherit it one day. Edward himself had been preparing for that possibility for years. Will not go to Edward. Another source will not go to Edward. Another source added that, as far as Charles was concerned, the title would not be passed to Edward and his family. These statements shocked many royal watchers who had assumed that Edward would automatically receive the honor. To make matters more confusing, Clarence House, which handled Charles's office at the time, released a statement suggesting that the reports were only speculation. They implied that nothing had been officially decided. This left the public uncertain. Was Edward going to receive his father's title or not? Charles explained his position by saying that he wanted a slimmed-down monarchy. His plan was to reduce the number of working royals holding major titles and carrying out official duties. According to a courtier who spoke to the Daily Mail, Charles believed that giving Edward the Duke of Edinburgh title did not fit this new vision. The reason was that the title would not only belong to Edward, it would later pass to Edward's son, James. That would continue the line and keep the title active within the wider royal family. However, many observers felt that this explanation did not fully make sense. Critics pointed out that Charles had not seemed worried about slimming down the monarchy in other situations.
we also share with so many of you in the United Kingdom, in all the countries.
For example, in 2018, he had no problem allowing his younger son, Prince Harry, to receive the Duke of Sussex title when he married Meghan Markle. Even after Harry stepped back from royal duties, the title remained his. Likewise, Prince Andrew continued to hold the Duke of York title despite the serious controversy surrounding his connection to Jeffrey Epstein. These examples made some people question whether the slimmed-down monarchy argument was being applied consistently, or whether it was being used mainly in Edward's case. The story took another unexpected turn in November 2022, shortly after Charles officially became king following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Reports began circulating that Buckingham Palace was considering giving the Duke of Edinburgh title to Princess Charlotte instead of Edward. Princess Charlotte is the daughter of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. This idea surprised many people because the title had such a strong connection to Philip and his long life of service. Prince Edward eventually addressed the situation in an interview with the BBC. Speaking honestly, he said that the idea of him becoming Duke of Edinburgh had once been something discussed long ago, almost like a dream his father had hoped for. He described it as a pipe dream, meaning something that sounded nice but was uncertain. Though Edward's words sounded calm and respectful, but there was a hint of disappointment beneath them. What made Edward not to receive the title everyone believed was meant for him? Why was it later conferred on him? Let's find out. The truth behind Edward's 2023 title. On March 10, 2023, Prince Edward celebrated his 59th birthday. It should have been a simple and happy day, filled with warm wishes and quiet family joy. Instead, it became one of the most talked-about moments in recent royal history. On that very day, Buckingham Palace announced that King Charles III had officially given his younger brother Edward the title of Duke of Edinburgh. At first glance, this seemed like a generous and meaningful gift. The title had once belonged to their father, Prince Philip, and many people believed for years that Edward would one day receive it. In fact, there had long been an understanding within the royal family that Edward would inherit the title after Philip's death. For nearly 2 years before this announcement, Edward had faced public embarrassment and uncertainty. After Prince Philip died in April 2021, many expected that Edward would quickly be named the new Duke of Edinburgh.
And I hope you enjoyed the experience. And I'm sure there were times when you wondered why you were doing it.
Instead, nothing happened. The title remained unused. There was no clear explanation. So when the title was finally given to him, it did not feel entirely like a joyful celebration. To some royal watchers, it seemed less like a thoughtful birthday present and more like a carefully calculated decision. Royal experts soon pointed out an important detail hidden in the announcement. Edward was not given the title in the usual way. His dukedom was granted as a life peerage. This meant he would hold the title only for the rest of his life. After his death, the title would not pass down to his son. Instead, it would return to the crown. When Prince Philip received the Duke of Edinburgh title in 1947, it was hereditary. That meant his children could inherit it. The same rule applied to other royal dukedoms in recent history. Prince Andrew, as Duke of York, holds a hereditary title. Prince William became Duke of Cambridge when he married, and Prince Harry became Duke of Sussex. In all these cases, the titles were designed to be passed down to their children. Edward's situation was different. His dukedom breaks the pattern. It is the only recent royal dukedom that is not hereditary. That difference carries serious consequences for his family. Edward's son James, who is currently known as the Earl of Wessex, will not inherit the Duke of Edinburgh title when his father dies. Instead, once Edward passes away, the title will simply end. It will go back to the crown, and the reigning monarch at that time will be free to give it to someone else. In practical terms, this means the Edinburgh title will exist for only one generation under Edward. According to royal journalist, the decision to make the title non-hereditary may have been made with the future in mind. The idea is that the title could later be given to one of Prince William's children. Many believe that it could eventually be awarded to Princess Charlotte. If that happens, the title would return to the direct line of the future king, rather than remain within Edward's branch of the family. In this way, King Charles appeared to keep his father's promise, but only partly. On the surface, he honored Prince Philip's long-held wish by finally giving Edward the Duke of Edinburgh title. However, by changing the rules and making it a life-only honor, he altered the deeper meaning of that promise. But Charles ensured that this would not. Happen. Instead of becoming a lasting family legacy, the title will last only as long as Edward lives. Some royal commentators have described this as a quiet but powerful message. The contrast becomes even clearer when compared to Prince Andrew's situation. Despite the serious controversies and public disgrace surrounding Andrew, he has kept his Duke of York title. His title remains hereditary. No change has been made to reduce it to a life honor. Officially, he is still Duke of York, and the title could, in theory, pass down according to the normal rules. To many observers, the message seemed unmistakable. A prince who faced scandal and stepped back from public duties still holds a permanent hereditary honor. Meanwhile, Edward, often described as loyal, hardworking, and dependable, received a title that will disappear when he does. Edward has generally avoided controversy throughout his life. He carried out royal duties quietly. For years, he appeared content to work behind the scenes without demanding high-profile recognition. But how did Edward's lawyer manage to outsmart the crown? Could he have been guided by an insider? Let's take a closer. Edward Bagshot Park deal. While many people were busy arguing about royal titles and whether someone deserved to be called a duke, something much more important was quietly taking place out of public view. Titles in the royal family may sound impressive, but they are mostly symbolic. They bring status, respect, and public attention, but they do not automatically bring money. For example, the title Duke of Edinburgh does not come with land that can be owned or income that can be collected. It is an honor, not a business. Real power, however, often comes from property. Land and long-term property rights can create financial security and influence that lasts for generations. In 1998, long before he became Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward, then known as the Earl of Wessex, made an important property arrangement. He leased Bagshot Park from the Crown Estate. Bagshot Park is not a small house. It is a grand mansion with about 120 rooms. The property sits on 51 acres of land inside Windsor Great Park, one of the most beautiful and historic royal parks in Britain. It is private, spacious, and extremely valuable because of its location near Windsor Castle and London. The original lease agreement was considered modest by royal standards. Edward was given a 50-year lease. At first, he paid £5,000 per year in rent. That might sound surprisingly low, but there was a reason for it. The mansion needed major renovation work. The total cost of the refurbishment was around £3 million. Edward personally spent £1.36 million of that amount, while the Crown Estate paid for the remaining balance. After the renovations were completed, the annual rent was set to rise to £90,000. According to the National Audit Office, this arrangement reflected market value at the time. In other words, it was said to be fair and in line with normal property rules. In 2007, Edward's legal team arranged a new property deal through his private company, Eclipse Nominees Limited. Instead of keeping the original 50-year lease, Edward paid a one-time premium of £5 million to extend the lease to 150 years. That is 3 times longer than the original agreement. In exchange, the yearly rent was reduced to what is known as a peppercorn rent. This is a legal term that means the rent is almost nothing, often just £1 or even less per year. It is mainly symbolic, used to show that a formal contract exists. The new lease contains no strict limits on resale. The only condition is that any future buyer must prove they can properly maintain the historic property. That is an important rule, but it does not prevent selling the lease. Unlike some other royal lease agreements, this one does not limit inheritance to specific family members. For example, Prince Andrew's lease at Royal Lodge reportedly contains restrictions that tie inheritance to Sarah Ferguson and their daughters. Edward's agreement is far more flexible. This means that the Duchess of Edinburgh, Lady Louise, and James could inherit the lease without legal barriers. More importantly, Edward himself could sell the leasehold if he chose to. The contract gives him the legal right to occupy and control a Crown Estate property for 150 years. Property experts estimate that Bagshot Park could be worth around £30 million. Yet Edward secured this long-term right by paying up front, with almost no ongoing rent. When the Times newspaper reported details of this arrangement in late 2025, critics reacted strongly. Some campaigners described the deal as obscene. Housing reform activists pointed out that ordinary leaseholders across the UK often struggle with rising ground rents and difficult lease conditions. Meanwhile, a royal who is about 15th in line to the throne has a lease that could potentially generate significant profit, even though the property technically belongs to the public through the Crown Estate. The Crown Estate did not give a detailed explanation of how it calculated the £5 million premium for extending the lease. This lack of transparency raised further questions. Some people wondered whether the price truly reflected full market value. However, not everyone agreed that the deal was improper. A respected property law firm stated that Edward's agreement is legally no different from a standard long lease transaction. While the property itself is prestigious and royal, the contract follows ordinary property law. From a legal perspective, is it a normal commercial arrangement? What is Edward's constitutional function? Let's find out. Edward's constitutional role. One very important part of Prince Edward's inheritance is something many people hardly talk about. It is not a grand title or a grand house. It is his position as a counselor of state. While royal titles often attract public attention, this role carries real responsibility and real power behind the scenes. In December 2022, a new law was passed that officially added Princess Anne and Prince Edward to the group of counselors of state. This was a major decision. Counselors of state are senior members of the royal family who are allowed to step in and act for the monarch when he is away from the United Kingdom or unable to carry out his duties because of illness or other serious reasons. In simple terms, they can temporarily use the king's authority. Counselors of state can attend important government meetings, they can sign official state papers, they can receive foreign ambassadors on behalf of the king, they can even give formal approval to laws passed by Parliament. When they perform these tasks, they are not acting in their own name. They are acting with the authority of the monarch himself. That is why trust is so important in this position. What makes Edward's appointment even more significant is that it lasts for life. Once named, he will remain a counselor of state permanently. This means he will always be one of the select few who can step forward if the monarch cannot perform his duties. That kind of long-term responsibility shows how highly he is regarded within the royal structure. Under the previous rules, the group of counselors of state included Prince Harry and Prince Andrew. On paper, this made sense because the system traditionally followed the line of succession. However, in reality, neither man was in a strong position to carry out the role effectively. Prince Harry had moved abroad and was no longer working as a full-time royal. He had also publicly criticized the royal family in interviews and media projects. Because he was living outside the United Kingdom and had stepped back from royal duties, it became unrealistic for him to represent the monarch in official state matters. Prince Andrew faced even more serious problems. He had become involved in a major public scandal that damaged his reputation. As a result, he withdrew from public royal duties. Although he technically remained in the line of succession, he was not in a position where he could confidently act on behalf of the king without causing controversy. This situation created a serious issue for King Charles III. A monarch must always have trusted and active representatives available. Why did Edward win the long game? Could it be as a result of careful calculation? Let's take a closer look. The quiet victory of Prince Edward. The title of Duke of Edinburgh, even though it is only granted for his lifetime, still places Prince Edward among the most senior and respected members of the royal family. It is not just a decorative label. It carries history, meaning, and strong public recognition. Holding this title connects him directly to his father, Prince Philip, and keeps that legacy alive in a very visible way. At the same time, Edward's position is strengthened by something even more practical: property. His family holds a 150-year lease on Bagshot Park. Beyond property, there is also purpose. The charitable work connected to the Duke of Edinburgh name gives Edward international relevance. The global reach of the Duke of Edinburgh's award continues to shape young people's lives across continents. There is also his constitutional role. The Councillors of State Act 2022 confirmed his permanent position as a Councillor of State. This is not symbolic. It gives him a formal place within the constitutional framework of the United Kingdom. Removing him from that role would require an Act of Parliament. In other words, it cannot be done casually or quietly. It is protected by law. That legal protection gives Edward a stability that few others in the royal family enjoy. By 2025, his steady work had become impossible to ignore. He completed 307 official engagements, making him the third busiest royal, just behind Anne and Prince William. That number tells its own story. While others attracted headlines, Edward quietly carried out visit after visit, ceremony after ceremony, speech after speech. He represented the king on important overseas tours to Papua New Guinea, Japan, India, and Canada. These were not small appearances. Representing the monarch abroad requires trust and reliability. He also served as Lord High Commissioner to the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, a historic and respected role. In recognition of his service, he received Scotland's highest royal honour, the Order of the Thistle. That honour links him deeply to Scotland's traditions and royal heritage. Edward also accepted the patronage of Outward Bound, further strengthening his connection to his father's lifelong passion for youth development and outdoor challenges. Step by step, responsibility by responsibility, he reinforced the legacy of Prince Philip in a practical and lasting way. So, what do you think about Edward Lawyer's shocking confirmation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.